Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to WTW. My name is Carlos Pereira. I am the co-chair for MCIN UK, WTW. We are organizing this event in partnership with Talk About Black Group, YDWC, and other partners, as you can see here on the screen. As we are in Black History Month, we thought that it would be the appropriate time to organize this debate. It's a debate that is intended to prompt action. So we'll hear from a number of speakers and the debaters, but I'm delighted, first and foremost, to be introducing you to some of our speakers shortly. And just to add a couple of other points. One is that the media team will take some still photos of the event, and we'll film the debaters only and not the public, the guests, for the purpose of posting on social media. But Chatham House rules apply in relation to discussions that take place here today. Okay. I am now delighted to introduce Carl Hess, WTW CEO.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Earlier today, I gave a town hall in this auditorium for WTW employees and managed to nearly trip and fall on my face on the one step up here. So I was petrified to see a cello here earlier going, there's no way it's going to survive me. And now I have to sort of look at my screen and hold the microphone at the same time. This is probably going to go very badly. I apologize. Anyway, welcome to WTW, everybody, and good evening. And I'd like to send a thank you to all the organizations represented at this event and your commitment to equity, inclusion, and diversity across the industry. And a big thanks to all of you for joining us this evening and bringing your open minds to this discussion. Whether I'm sitting in the audience or on this stage, I always like to pause and take in the energy of the crowd. There's something just so palpable when we're all focused on the same topic at the same time with the same intention. It feels powerful, it feels productive, it feels invigorating, and it feels inspiring. So, as Carlos said, we're delighted to be partnering with Talk About Black to host this event for Black History Month this year. Today's topic is foundational and transformational at the same time. Does being from a minority background influence hiring decisions and career progression more than merit? Hiring and career progression are pivotal moments that are both impacting people and impacted by people. I'm looking forward to exploring this topic more deeply through this debate-style session. I have no doubt it will be thought-provoking and will serve as the start of more conversations, more perspective sharing, and most importantly, more action. Our auditorium, so a bit of an advertisement, no apologies. These conversations, perspectives, and actions are a critical part of WTW's I&D vision. At WTW, we know that when our individual talents are combined, we unlock our collective potential and create an environment where everyone can be authentic, curious, and bold. We think our workforce should reflect the unique people in our markets, and we're better together because each one of us is different. That is the essence of one WTW. I am about to drop the microphone. This vision can only be achieved through intentional and thoughtful designs, an embedding of our colleague experience, and a focus on building the inclusive environment and culture we want to foster. This provides colleagues with a strong sense of purpose and belonging, where everyone's heard and valued, where everyone can be their authentic self, where we encourage curiosity and innovation, and we're bold in our thinking and care about our impact. WTW's dedicated to ensuring our values and I&D commitments are reflected in every interaction and throughout our colleague experience. And to achieve this, we embed inclusion and diversity principles into our talent processes and continue to build an inclusive culture, ensuring our colleagues feel valued and that they belong. To do so, we focus on three key areas: attract and hire, growing our pipeline for underrepresented talent; develop, promote, and retain, so we can increase the overall diversity in our overall talent and leadership pipeline. And third, culture and brand. We want to promote an inclusive culture and an inclusive work environment. The intersection of those three areas with tonight's topic is not by chance, I assure you. As I said at the start, hiring and career progression are pivotal moments that are impacting both people and impacted by people. That's why we focus on change in those moments. So we build plans and we set priorities that will drive change in these moments. An important way we're focused on developing our culture and brand in line with our inclusion and diversity principles is through networks to support colleagues. Carlos alluded to one earlier. We have several different colleague inclusion networks. Our involvement in today's event has been organized by our Multicultural Inclusion Network, which I'm proud to be a member of. All our networks are open to all colleagues. After all, we need both the people who are impacted and the people who are doing the impacting to be involved. They're at the heart of driving our I&D strategy and continue to build an inclusive culture to make sure our colleagues feel included. This takes more than just belief and desire for change. This takes commitment and it takes action. I commend everyone in this room for taking a collective step forward, potentially out of your comfort zone, but within a safe and supportive environment tonight. So now, having finished my advertisement, it is my great pleasure to introduce Jana Okusi. Justin is the CIO at St. James Place and co-founder of Talk About Black. To take us on the next step of this journey, please welcome Justin.
Thank you, Carl. Oh, I think this is working. Let's put this down, I think. I do appreciate the work that WTW do, not only within, but actually within the industry, and really helping other businesses focus on what is a really big issue. So what is the most dangerous feeling we can have that prevents change? Is it complacency? Is it fear? I'd actually say it's comfort. No forward motion comes when we feel too comfortable. No disruption comes when we feel comfortable. Nothing gets better. So if you really want to see change, we must get comfortable being very uncomfortable. Clearly, we need to talk about race. And to do that, we need to do so safely and constructively without our experiences being labeled, shamed, or dismissed. Even when it's difficult, we have to keep on talking. We need to be comfortable being or feeling uncomfortable. My name is Justin Okusi. I am the Chief Investment Officer at St. James's Place and also co-founder of Talk About Black. Happy Black History Month, everybody. It's great to be here. But as I said, look, it's not just about talking about race. Actually, it's about acting on it as well, as Carl mentioned. Not just during Black History Month, but really in each and every month if we truly want to see change and that the industry really needs. And it's really important to recognize the progress, right? There has been progress. The representation of black people in our organizations across the industry has increased, right? Particularly at junior levels. Even at senior levels, it has increased, and we have to acknowledge that. At the same time, we've seen lots of engagement post-2020, post-George Floyd. We've seen lots and lots of engagement of companies actually buying into the initiatives, trying to unkink the hosepipe, as we always talk about, willing to listen, willing to learn. But I think it's really important that we do not take progress as a victory. Progress is not victory. They're two different things. Still, when you look across the industry, you've got less than 1% of fund managers that are black. Only a handful of black people in the C-suite. And yet we're seeing diversity fatigue. People saying the conversation's moved on and ready to focus on another topic. We're seeing marketing machines across all businesses in our industry saying that they've achieved victory. Seeing companies, and this is one I heard at the beginning of the month, we're seeing companies now saying they're no longer supporting Black History Month events because it's too narrow. And as the attention shifts away from this, it's going to get harder. It's going to get less comfortable to talk, to act, than it was when the topic was high on the agenda. But we need to continue to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Hopefully it's going to work. Can I change the slide? Ooh, I can see it changing there. Hey. Okay. Thank you. Cool. So Black History Month, Talk About Black has over the years done a number of different events. You can see in 2020, we interviewed John Parker on the Parker Review Part 2. We had Clive Myrie and David Olashuga talking about Black history in 2021. We went through all the initiatives in 2022. And I'm just hoping, in fact, I know that this event will be as good as those other events. Really looking forward to the debate. But as we often talk about within Talk About Black, we talk about these kinks in the hosepipe, these kinks that stop talent from flowing through. And what we try to do, working with the Diversity Project, is we try to focus our attention on those kinks. Whether it's the Catalyst after-school program, 16 to 18-year-olds, helping them understand the money management, helping them to understand what is needed to get into money management, but also giving kind of life skills like presentation skills and sometimes called softer skills. The Skills Workshop, designed for university students or students of all types who are trying to get into the industry. We do things like, I think 60 partners have signed up year after year after year. And the idea is, help people with CV writing, help people with through assessment centres, help people actually get into the room when for interviews. And then, of course, we have progression. We know that there's a challenge to get into the industry, but also, I think probably the biggest challenge right now is when people are in the industry, how do they progress? And therefore, we have 2 programs focused on that, 2 initiatives. The N Circle mentoring circles. So what do these do? Essentially monthly mentoring circles, helping people navigate their companies, helping people navigate that corporate environment, because the feedback has been that actually people, when they first get into companies, are really struggling to navigate that corporate environment, with Black role models as mentors. And then finally, we have the Black Leaders Program, and this is for people who are kind of at that kind of glass ceiling level, where we're trying to help them, trying to give them the tools to get into that C-suite. So mentored by C-suite people, people in the C-suite right across the industry. And the idea is here that it's not only a mentoring program, it's also a reverse mentoring program where the mentees can educate and help the people in the C-suite. So before I hand over to Emily, I want to leave you with a sense of optimism. I know we still have a long way to go, but I am optimistic. These initiatives, I think, have all been actually very successful in their own right. But the solution isn't simple. It won't happen overnight. But by remaining committed, by listening, by learning, by acting, by doing all these things together, importantly, I think we can make a difference and really create a culture and an inclusive environment that our industry deserves. But we all have to be comfortable feeling uncomfortable. My name is Justin Nuxley. Thank you very much.
Are these yes, they are. Good. Thank you, Justin. Welcome, and thank you to you all for joining us. Thank you in particular to Talk About Black for allowing us to partner with you for this event. Many of you may know that Brewin is a specialist financial services recruitment consultancy. We are a recruitment partner to the vast majority of the firms represented in this room and have worked with many of you since our inception in 2010. Diversity, inclusion, and equity is absolutely central to the work that we do, and I'm extremely proud of the reputation and awards that Brewin has built within the space and won. As financial services specialists, we are acutely aware of the lack of black and particularly black female representation across the sector and the role that we play to help combat this. Bruin is also proud to be one of 60 firms involved in the skills workshop launched by Talk About Black and just mentioned by Justin. Bruin also participates in the 10,000 Black Interns programme, which aims to transform the horizons and prospects of young black people within the UK. We also recognise the lack of representation in the recruitment industry itself, and Bruin is one of a group of companies working together to collectively remove barriers for black recruiters in the sector. From our perspective as recruiters, it is clear that talent pipelining, retention, and advancement strategies need to work hand in hand to achieve meaningful progress. Ultimately, the diversity of your organisation is a reflection of your processes, who you hire, reward, and promote. I think we'd all agree that merit should be the most important factor in career progression, but it is undeniable that systemic barriers still exist. And if we want to see genuine change, then we need to change our processes. Thank you again for joining us. This evening, we're asking for your participation in the form of anonymous opinions. So if you haven't already, please can you scan the QR code there now and log in to Mentimeter. Whilst you're doing that, I'd like to invite the YDWC up to the stage. So to start off with, to make sure that we're on the same page for today's debate, let's define our terms. What does the term merit mean to you in the context of professional growth and career advancement? So ability, success, reward, capable, earned, all really interesting. Okay, so now just answering yes or no. Have you ever felt that being from a minority background has influenced your own career journey? And has that influence been positive or negative? I'd now like to give a very warm welcome to someone who is a global public speaking and debating expert, as well as an author, who recently published a masterclass with Malala Yousafzai on how to achieve social change. Please welcome Lewis Iwu and the Young Diverse World Changers.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And seeing the results of that Menti poll reminds me of a couple of things. I'm Lewis Iwu. I'm the co-founder of a social purpose strategy firm. We work with a number of brands, companies, and charities to help them have a positive social impact. And actually what we've seen just now in terms of the results really does reflect, I think, the current state of the conversation. First of all, just 3 quick points. The importance, I think, of having these spaces to discuss things like racism in the workplace. You'll be surprised at the number of places which wouldn't embrace a format like this. And I think this in itself is important. The second is, what do you do when all the quick wins have been seized upon and the hard work, the really difficult stuff that takes time and effort is next up? And I think the point we heard earlier on about the importance of not losing momentum, of not getting comfortable, not declaring victory is very important, especially when people have a preconceived idea of what merit is, and as a result, programs or initiatives that might be based on equity are not promoted or supported. And finally, we live in a context where there is a backlash against the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, not just in the US, but as we've started to see here as well. So rooms like this, allies like this, and conversations that we're about to have are important to keep people's feet to the fire and keep momentum. So with that, we've got a really exciting debate for you in a moment. You probably remember at school and university, the debaters at school and university being the nerds in the corner who never had any friends. This is different. This is going to be interesting, super exciting, and we generally have four of some of the leading speakers and thinkers in this area who are about to speak. So in a moment, you're going to see two sides battle it out over the next half an hour. They have not been given the chance to pick their side. They've been allocated a side, but they're going to make the best possible case they can. So don't judge them based on their views. They're here to do a job, which is to make the case for their team. Each speaker is going to have 5 minutes. We're going to start with the proposition team. We're then going to move to the opposition, and it's going to repeat. In the middle of all of that, it's your turn. So we're going to have 20 minutes where you can ask questions, make any points, observations, commentaries. It will be Chatham House, so we're not going to record that bit. So you're free to actually talk freely, and this should be a safe space where people feel they're able to bring the views and opinions they have and put it on the table. Then the speakers are going to have one last chance to persuade you. They're going to respond to the points that you've made in the floor debate, and they're going to have another 5 minutes to give their summary speeches. Then we're going to have a vote at the end of it. So whilst you're listening to the speeches, begin to think about what would you say, how would you respond, how are you interpreting this, how are you reacting to everything that you hear. I'll be timekeeping as well, so I'll be militantly making sure that they won't go over time. I'll give a clap when they've got 1 minute and a double clap when they've got 5 minutes, i.e. no minutes left. So let's introduce the speakers. Speaking on the proposition side, we've got Bukola. Bukola is an undergrad at the LSE studying international social policy. Bukola will be supported, and a teammate will be Fatma, who's a final year student at Queen Mary studying international relations and also works at a Swiss tech firm. Please welcome the proposition. And their opponents speaking against the motion. We have Asha, who is an undergrad at Durham, currently doing a law conversion course at King's, and has actually represented her nation at the World Schools Debating Championships. We also have Kiana on opposition, who's a commercial litigator and a social entrepreneur. Please welcome the opposition. The motion is, does being from a minority background influence your entry and progression more than merit? And the proposition are going to be arguing that it does influence your entry and progression more than merit. So without further ado, I'd like to call upon the first speaker to open the motion in their name.
Hello guys, first I'd like to say Happy Black History Month. It's October, that's great. So as has already been said, the motion is, do we believe that being from a minority background influences hiring and progression more than merit? On side proposition, we do believe this, and I'll give you many reasons why that is true. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of our argument, I want to initially introduce you to the things I'm going to do in my speech. So first, I'm going to define the key concepts of the debate. We all understand what merit looks like, but I'm going to provide more framing and really provide the parameters that this debate will be happening in. Secondly, I'll provide a story of literally the stages in which being from a minority background can influence and disadvantage your career progression and hiring. Then I will give an initial argument about the initial problems with meritocracy, right? So on to the first thing. So defining merit. Merit is really conceptualizing the idea of meritocracy in which things and jobs and things are allocated to people based off talent over luck, right? Meritocracy does not allow in its definition for any recognition of social and economic inequalities because everyone is on an even playing field. But as we already know, and you guys have voted, that's not true. And that onside proposition is our key point of contention. Meritocracy is a myth. We do not believe it exists, and that is why being from an ethnic minority background simply influences your hiring and career progression. So to provide more basis of this debate, we're arguing that being from a minority ethnic background influences negatively, as well as in some cases, more often now, it can also influence positively, but still there is a negative influence. So in the case of ethnic minorities, we are saying that there has been historical and structural barriers that have stopped the progression of ethnic minorities to high paying and higher education. And this has found its roots in colonization, white supremacy, but although we might think of all these words and isms as old narratives that don't exist anymore, I think they are very much prevalent in the way we think today, and that's coined in the idea and the psychological concept of unconscious bias, which I'll talk about more later. But before I get on to all of that, I really want to talk about meritocracy. I want to double back on what meritocracy is and what it looks like. So I've already kind of said that meritocracy is a myth, right? For mainly because of the way it's presented in society. But I want to double back and I want to say meritocracy as an idea is flawed. Meritocracy, even in a vacuum, simply doesn't work. Okay, so meritocracy as a definition has already been spoken about. We all understand how meritocracy looks. I'm not going to go over that again. But meritocracy believes that we all are judged on the same metric. But what is that metric? We all understand that merit and talent looks very different for different individuals and the way we understand talent. I'll give you a really small example, right? This is my favorite way to explain how meritocracy as an idea isn't necessarily true. So let's say you're on a train and you hear a beautiful voice, like a voice that literally is like stopping you in your tracks, and you're thinking, who could that voice be? And you potentially go to the next carriage and you see a child singing, and you're like, wow, that's incredible. That child is really talented. Compared to if you'd seen like a singer that you know there's a singer. You don't think, the talent isn't as there, right? So the way we look at talent and the way we judge talent is very based off of what we understand talent to look like. And that in and of itself is what is the dichotomy in meritocracy. We as humans make that judgment. And if that judgment is not the universal standard, meritocracy as an idea cannot be implemented without its problems. Sure.
Is posing as a singer but simply cannot sing. Surely in your world there's recognition that there is to some degree objective talent, and there is objectively individuals who are not as talented and, as you point, may not be able to sing in the carriage so beautifully.
I think my second point will really respond to that. I'm running out of time, so I'll try and respond to that in my second point. So this is interesting. As you were saying, like, what world would we say, right? Meritocracy is not only flawed, as I've already said, it also is problematic in its nature, but also harmful in its practice. The idea of meritocracy stops the recognition of inequality, stops the conversation happening of why is there not enough black people in higher paying jobs? Why is there not enough of black people on these boards, right? This meritocracy legitimates inequality. It perpetuates an idea that if we're all equal, they're simply not talented. They walk away from an interview thinking, I simply didn't get it because I'm not as good as the other people. When in actuality, there are social and economic, There are social and economic reasons and contexts that inhibit certain groups from actually progressing to these places. So, to conclude, I have provided a key definition of merit and how meritocracy is flawed in its nature and its practice, and in fact is harmful in its practice. My second speaker will further to talk about unconscious bias as a psychological concept in decision making and how that influences and weighs in on this debate. And with that, I beg you to propose.
I'd like to thank the first speaker for their speech, the great speech. You may have seen a point of information. Don't be shocked. That wasn't rogue. That's in the rules. Both speakers, in fact, all speakers are encouraged to offer points of information. It's a small interjection, and the speaker can decide to say yes or no. So it's all legit. It's all within the rules. I should also say a bit about why DWC is. It's an organisation that does lots of these debates and talks, and also helps promote representation, mentorship, and also skills development as well. So just a quick plug for the organisation. So I now want to call upon the first speaker from the opposition to respond to what they've just heard and can open the case for their side.
As the first speaker of the opposition, I would like to make our stance quite clear. We have no intentions of trying to disparage the objective reality which some people experience. We have no intentions of trying to deny the history that has existed in the corporate world that has disadvantaged many people from different backgrounds, such as people of color and women. Our point is that we have made some substantial changes which have resulted in meritocracy being an important factor, or being a factor that is privileged over things like background. That being said, I have 2 points to deliver to you today. Firstly, I'm going to talk about these changes. I'm going to talk about why the corporate world exists in a different format than it did 50 years ago. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about corporate accountability and why corporate accountability necessarily means that meritocracy must be the center of hiring, and I will explain that through 3 lenses. Firstly, the clients. Secondly, other employers. And thirdly, public and the public reputations of these companies. But before I do, I'd like to rebut some of the points made by Side Proposition. Side Proposition began their speech by structuring a large attack against meritocracy conceptually. They told us that whilst meritocracy is an idea, values talent over luck, that doesn't necessarily exist in practice. I have a couple of responses to this. So firstly, we think that meritocracy, which they described in their speech, isn't actually what meritocracy looks like practically. So what do I mean by this? What I mean is that, like, practically speaking, we don't automatically look at people as if we are all equal and thus assessed by merits. In practice, we kind of do acknowledge that there are some people that have certain skills over other people, or some people that have, other things to bring to companies, right? When we actually practically look at hiring, companies don't just look at the grades you have from Oxbridge or from whatever amazing university you went to. There are other factors that do impact hiring, and other skills or other places in which you can show that you have merit, show that you have accomplishments. For example, a lot of my CV is my debating. That is something that I can use. I can show my merit, and I can show how I've accomplished something, irregardless of my other accomplishments. I think that, no, thank you. In the same way that, I think that also we are able to assess merit in different ways, right? Just because, for example, just because someone isn't necessarily academic and is more athletic, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are not as hardworking. I think that it's quite obvious and evident that the version of meritocracy that's presented by the proposition isn't necessarily practically true. That being said, I'd like to move into my substantive case. Firstly, I'd like to start with talking about the changes in the world. I think for the past few hundred years since the inception of colonization, we have had a lot of horrific social ideals that have plagued many groups of people. But I think as we've progressed, many people reject those ideas. When we used anthropology to disprove racial science, when we demonstrated that people were capable of accomplishing these same things as straight white men, which is the typical example used in these situations. I think that through the changes that we have in the world right now, I think a lot of people are more question their own biases more. But I think secondarily, I think that the fact that we live in a multicultural society makes it much harder to develop these really horrific ideals, right? If from the point in which you were a child, you're at a school of people who don't look like you, who have different experiences, I think it's much harder for you to develop these horrible ideas, right? Why do I think this is important? I think this is important because it means that there's a large group of people who are willing to reject the racial ideas that separate people or that see people as being inferior. People who are willing to question themselves and question a society that presents that. And I think this is important when we come to my second point, the point of corporate accountability. I think that merit matters in hiring because there are 3 main groups of people which companies have to be accountable to. when they hire. Firstly, we have clients. I think when it comes to clients, companies are often given things like incredibly sensitive information, or like law firms and consulting firms are often like, a client comes to you with a problem that you need to solve. And I think that's like important for several reasons. Firstly, it's important to hire people who are actually capable of doing the job because of things like professional negligence and like the liability that like opens up for the company. But secondly, like clients are the biggest way in which companies are held to financial account. If you're hiring a bunch of incompetent white guys simply because they're white, that's not really going to work out for you in the current like world that we live in. My time's protected. But if you hire people who are actually competent, and this is why merit is actually quite important, you have to hire people who are capable of doing that job. Secondly, I think the other group are employees. Other employees who are hired by a company all work hard. The majority of people who do have jobs have to go to university, or they have to train or have an apprenticeship, which that requires a lot of work. I think at the point at which companies are hiring people who are lesser qualified simply because they are like white, or they are because of the majority group, I think other employees are enraged and feel like feel as if the company needs to hold themselves to account to them. Like, everyone gets angry over nepotism hires. Nobody likes when there's someone in the offices that is incompetent, because that means that there's more work for you to do. But I think finally, because of the more multicultural society we live in, because of the widespread rejection of things like white supremacy, I think that these companies are generally more accountable to the public. I think there's substantial backlash when your managing board is full of like a bunch of straight white dudes. And for these reasons, I think it's probably fair to say that when we look at hiring, merit is more important. It's more important that you're able to fulfill your obligations to your clients, to make your other employees feel as if they can trust you. And I think it's important that you maintain your public representation. And I think all of those things happen in the hiring room. Thank you.
Let's thank Asha for an excellent speech. So you've got the opening salvo from two sides. The second speakers are now going to come forward and continue the case for their respective sides. So I'd like to call upon the second speaker from the proposition team.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the opposition for a brilliant yet pointless speech. If I may start, I think it's almost a silly question what we're discussing here today. Like, if we're really going to get down to the basis and the nature of it. I'm going to put up two specific points, right? I'd firstly like to discuss the unconscious bias of decision-making, and secondly, the influences of being from a minority background, be it negative or positive. I'm standing in front of you here today, and I had a question to myself. I didn't come with the right attire to this event today. I had a lot of other things doing. I'm standing in front of you here today in jeans and a hoodie. Now, if I stood in front of you today in this building and I came downstairs and I asked, I'd like to speak to a hiring manager, I would be turned away instantly. No matter if I have a wardrobe that is as brilliant and as fulfilling as the ones that you guys are wearing today, right? We have an unconscious bias that determines what decisions that we make before we even realize that we've made that decision. I stand here today and I'd like to discuss the fact that people are more likely to hire somebody that looks like them over somebody that they have a preconceived notion about. There's a brilliant study by the University of Chicago, and it happened in 2003, and they discussed where they went ahead and they studied and looked at people who had made fictitious white CVs. And what they did was they realized that between the white CVs and between the minority background CVs, there was a 50% higher callback with these white CVs. Now, you're telling me that you're more likely to hire a Bob over a Babatunde, even though Babatunde may have done 3 more degrees than Bob. I ask you today, what we are arguing isn't that merit isn't important. We are very, very much aware of this. In fact, you wouldn't be standing within the walls of WTW today if you didn't have an equivalent or substantial amount of merit to bring you in today. We're discussing that it is a hindrance to your career progression or a hindrance to your hiring. We're discussing the fact that actually you may have to work twice as hard. And we hear this from a very young age, be it from a minority background household or from a non-minority background household. I think it is as simple as this. Once you have the unconscious biases that have developed and you have understood truly that actually we are human beings and we do have ideas of people, be it negative or positive prior to starting, we're then able to move on to the next section, the influences. Brilliant. Everybody has a diversity, equity, and inclusion office now. We're really getting there, aren't we? I want to ask you guys, So many organizations have now decided to recognize that their DEI is getting a bit low. And there was a really brilliant study that we did, and Lloyds Bank had released a statement, no judgment to them, saying that they were looking to get a 3% increase higher by 2030 for their minority backgrounds, because it simply wasn't enough. And they wrote in really small letters that they wanted a 0.6% increase in senior management. 0.6%, guys. If I fed you a meal today and I added 0.6% more food in there, would you feel full? I don't think so. The idea is that these initiatives are brilliant. You know, they are starting to prove that merit may be great, but merit alone may not be efficient to achieve the equality or the equity that we want to get. Ms. Eyre of Bruin brilliantly mentioned that we are working towards these initiatives and bringing people together in one room to discuss and to further understand how you feel within these workplaces. But let me say something. There are things that we are saying on this stage that you may not feel comfortable saying in your own offices. Why is there a multicultural network if the minority isn't a consideration over merit, right? I'd like to conclude, because I know that I speak a lot, by saying that even in a theoretical meritocracy, as the opposition had spoken about, and in a realistic meritocracy, it wouldn't take into consideration token lifestyle characteristics, objects of obstruction that have slowed down or reduced people's careers. Merit is merely a shared foundation, as I mentioned. And to even be within the walls of WTW, you have to have all had some sort of degree, right? You'd have to all had worked hard. We're not talking about merit. We're talking about by what metrics is merit discussed. And by what metrics, I mean whose eyes decide what kind of merit is deserved and what kind of merit deserves to take further. Does being from a minority background influence hiring decision and career progression more than merit? I ask you here today, how was your hiring journey on the way to getting into here? Thank you.
Thank you, Fatma, for that fantastic speech. And goodbye to the Lloyds Banking Group contingent who just walked out the door. See you on the way out. We have one last speaker before it's your turn to make points from the floor. So our final speaker, Kiana, is going to conclude the case for the opposition in terms of the main speeches. The floor is yours.
Sorry, I'm not texting, just get my timer up. I don't want to be chatting all evening. And I should apologise, I will have to dash after I speak, but that's not because I'm afraid of how you're going to vote at the end of this debate at all. Okay, so, good evening. My name is Kiana. Minority background influences hiring decisions and career progression. Now, I just want to make some things really clear before I go on to a few points of rebuttal. First of all, actually, let me switch around. Let's rebut first and I'll tell you after. What side proposition are doing is actually quite frustrating because they're taking us to this conceptual world. They're giving a whole new definition to merit. And the reality is when you were asked a few moments ago what you thought about merit, you told us about ability, capability, how hard you work in your skill set. Not this random myth of all of these different level playing fields and this race and that race. It's the equivalent, no thank you, of the opposite of buzzwords on the other side. And I just want to clear everything up before we shift gears. Because we spoke about unconscious bias, which is even shocking coming from side proposition, because unconscious bias, even as a term, actually really sticks a thorn in their point, because unconscious bias devoids individuals and companies of actual accountability and responsibility. Even if you didn't do it with the hardest intentions, you knew that you picked your mate. You knew that you went to the group or chose to hire the person who met the vibe check. You knew what you were doing. You know the stereotypes you hold. You may not want to acknowledge the uncomfortable reality, and we heard about the importance of discomfort, but you knew the choices you were making. And that is why I'm so shocked that Fatma would stand up here and talk about unconscious bias in a debate where they're seemingly saying that race is the most important influence when it comes to your hiring decisions. Now, I have about 3 minutes, so I'll get on to my actual point. I'll take you in a second. So I'll take you after I just clear this up. On-side opposition, we want to make it clear, race does impact your career progression and hiring decisions. Some of us here, myself included, will know all too well about the glass ceilings and the actual reality of being an ethnic minority in the workplace. And although Justin did say very, very well that, progression isn't the victory, but progression is imperative. It's the catalyst that we need on this race. And we say that this debate is actually set in 2023, not 2003. And therefore, the motion as it is, just simply in its binary form, doesn't stand. Now, I have nothing against 2003. I personally was not working then, but I will come and explain to you why I have chosen that wonderful year. Go ahead, Fatma.
Just before I get to my question, I'd like to say that 2003, the board of members are old enough to still be there today. If not, they're close counterparts that they trained just under.
And oh, Fatma.
What I'd like to say is that you like to break down the topic of unconscious bias. Interesting, but natural bias?
Okay, Fatma, do you know what? Fatma, I only have 3 minutes.
Innately biased.
No problem. So 2. Okay, I only have 2. So let me just address a few things. We're not disregarding the notion of bias here. We're not disregarding it. And this debate tonight isn't actually about bias. It's just shocking that you would use that to perpetuate your side when in actuality it becomes a thorn when we look at the reality of where we are at today. What I am saying, and the reason I mentioned 2003, is that I am so proud and so privileged to actually be raised in a very beautiful Jamaican family. And that means I'm also raised in an intergenerational community, which means on Sundays we have Sunday dinners. And Sunday dinner is a serious place for a lot of chatting. And around that table, I can assure you that I've spoken to my mum, my grandmother, my dad, my granddad, my brothers, my uncles, and everyone who chimes in with their personal opinions of how much they know about their career and their life. And one thing that's really interesting is when we talk about the impact in the workplace, one thing they recognize is, things are different in your day, Kiana. You have blind interviews, you have targets, you have visibility. Things change. So I agree that the board may still look the same, or the board right now may have a few people that should very much near be retirement or should just give up the spot. But the reality being that when we actually do have these conversations and we look at this comparatively, we see a shift. And the fact that I here can stand as a commercial litigator, and I could tell you very openly that there were individuals in my family who wanted to be lawyers and simply weren't even given the opportunity to even go to university, let alone college, because they had teachers who there, very much so because of their race, said no. I can tell you that things have shifted. Now, what we say on side opposition, I want to make very clear, because I don't want to stand up here and defend the side that I simply don't believe. But what we say on side opposition is this. We agree that race impacts. We don't want to, as my colleague said, pretend that race isn't a thing. We're not here to do that because that's been a problem for so long. What we say, in order to move forward, I promise you I'm coming, in order to move forward, in order to actually cultivate genuine change, in order to make sure that there is genuine racial equity, we need to acknowledge that there are other obstacles in the room, and that we, those of us who are from ethnic minorities, want to be recognized for our merit and our talent, and not just our race. We want to be recognized as whole people that bring everything to the table, and that is what influences our career progression today. Thank you very much.
Let's thank Kiana for speech. Now it's time for the floor debate. Now, as I said before, if you could introduce your name, maybe your organisation and your point. The speakers aren't going to respond to it right now. The summary speakers will incorporate their response in their speeches as well. So you're not going to get direct response. So I think we've got a couple of roving mics. So who wants to kick off? Just a reminder, it's Chatham House rules. We're not going to record this bit. Feel free to be open and express yourselves. The opposition, to give the summary even, to conclude a case for their side.
To summarize for the opposition, I'd actually like to center this debate back into reality. I'd like to talk about meritocracy and what it means and what it looks like. Because I think at the end of this debate and after that insightful session from the audience, I think what we can conclude is that hard work conceptually and merit conceptually isn't a bad idea. People who work at themselves and improve themselves and have talent and have intelligence or have something they can contribute that they develop, those are all meaningful contributions. I think the point is that as it stands, if a company is claiming that meritocracy is the thing they use to assess, that we must hold them to account. And that's what we're saying inside opposition. We think that, yes, race is a factor, but through meritocracy, we have a means to hold companies to account when they're not operating as they say they are, when they are actually using other factors to intervene. That's what we say on side opposition. So I'd like to kind of respond to some of the things and actually highlight some of the things that were said by the audience that I think are quite relevant to this idea. So I think one of the most poignant points in the audience was the point about career stifling bias. The point that many people get in the door and don't know how to progress their careers further, and then aren't able to actualize their concerns to any meaningful body that can push forward these concerns, that can question. Several points here and several things we're going to say on side opposition. We completely agree with many members of the audience. The issue at hand is far more wide-reaching than just reforming companies. The issue is that we need complete societal reform. The problem is that on a basic educational level, there are disparities when it comes to socioeconomics, but also disparities when it comes to schools. I mean, I read the news. There were hundreds of schools that were literally collapsing. There are students who are still not in schools. These are things that are pertinent barriers to people being able to access these channels, to people being able to actually develop their talents. And I think this is crucial because I think whilst companies still do have reasons as to why they value merit, which is also opposition's point. Keep in mind that merit is quite central to companies. Companies do want talent. Companies do want the ability to tell clients that they have the best and the brightest working for them. But what we think is we need to bridge the gap from the theoretical best and brightest to what actually is the best and the brightest. We need to allow people to actualize their talents. We need to allow people to move forward in society. And we think that this is why we think that meritocracy isn't on principle a bad idea. It is just the means in which we need to hold companies to account. So what did we say on side opposition? We told you various things. The first thing that we told you is that we've made significant leaps and bounds when it comes to societal progress. If I traveled back in time to the 1920s and told some random white guy that I went to university, he probably would have a complete meltdown. We have made significant leaps and bounds when it comes to our ability to access things, when it comes to the level of disparity in society. And we still have a long way to go. Make no mistake, that is not what we in opposition are saying. But we think the solution is actually to hold these companies to account. We think the solution is to show people that we are working hard, that we are capable of working hard. In fact, I think that merit and hard work are one of the most important ways in which people were able to show that people of color and marginalized people are able to show that we are no different to those who claimed to be above us. No, thank you. Secondly, I think we tell you that there are still reasons and still valid reasons as to why companies do focus on merit. So things like clients, things like having to hold themselves to account to other employees, and things specifically like public accountability and backlash. And I think I didn't necessarily have enough time to discuss my public accountability and backlash point when I was originally speaking, because I spent a lot of time in rebuttal. But I'd like to kind of rehash that and kind of emphasize that now. When we talk about public backlash and rebuttal, I mean this in the sense that we do not live in a world that is remotely similar to the one that we lived in years ago. Does that mean that this world is perfect? No. But it means that I think the general public are very, very sick of the idea that one specific group of people are better or more important or more valuable than the rest of larger society. I think most people are very aware of the socioeconomic disparities that exist. And why do I think this is crucial? I think this is crucial because I think that this means that is because people fundamentally want their talents to be valued. People do not, even people who are part of the majority, do not necessarily want to be given roles or jobs or progression simply because they are of that. I think that feels very disingenuous for those people. I think anyone who is a good character, who actually cares about developing talent, doesn't necessarily believe that it's acceptable for companies to continue on in this manner. So to conclude, what we are saying in opposition isn't that race does not play any kind of a factor, that race cannot be stifling. We think that the narrative of meritocracy needs to be challenged and that companies need to be held to account if meritocracy is what they claim that they are hiring through. And that is what we say in opposition. We say that meritocracy in principle is something that is good. Being able to work and being able to nurture and develop your talents and interests is something that is good. But that is the exact reason as to why we have to do everything within our power to reduce the inequality within society. Because the child who grows up in like Kensington should have the same access to anything as the child who grows up in like Bermuda, which is where I'm from. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank the summary speaker for the opposition and now the final speech in the debates from the proposition.
Okay, so I feel like I can really get into my groove now because I love a good third speech. So as main things I'm going to do in the speech is first identify the points of clashes that we've heard in this debate, give you some weighing, and really tell you why ultimately proposition has won this debate by a massive margin, to be honest, right? So first I want to respond to the floor questions to kind of get those out of the way. So we heard a question like, is merit about social capital? The answer is yes, but the understanding of that capital is very much a white narrative. What social capital looks like, what someone who's qualified looks like, is very, very much informed by racialized notions and narratives that are inbuilt into our society. All right, so we also heard a floor question that was relating to the idea of like how by numbers alone, there is a large proportion of ethnic minorities filling up certain roles. Am I correct in understanding? Cool. So, but we argue as like proposition that numbers aren't the only thing that matters. What are the value of their roles? How are they treated in their roles? The change hasn't been made yet. Yes, we're there, but we don't feel good. So that like us being there doesn't have as much value, and our work isn't valued to the same degree that, I'm sorry to any Bobs in the room, that Bob does, right? So let's look at, we also had another floor question about compromises. Oh, that one was very interesting. But I want to also say that compromises are only fair when everyone compromises, not just the ethnic minorities. Why do we have to compromise to a work culture that doesn't include our hairstyles, our fashion, things that actually formulate our black identity? As proposition, we don't believe that. So let's get on to the rebuttal. So opposition has completely misconstrued our argument and low-key the motion itself. So we heard a cop-out argument from First that attempted to deny the literal definition of meritocracy. And in debating, any team that tries to deny a definition, you know they've lost, because how can you deny a definition? Cool. So we've heard that, like, we apparently don't understand what meritocracy looks like, but you guys, as the audience, have told us what meritocracy looks like, and you understand that. Meritocracy is the belief that everyone is on an equal merit. The logical basis of meritocracy argues that everyone has to be equal in order to be judged on their merits. Any deviation from that is not meritocracy. If you acknowledge that meritocracy as an idea does not acknowledge inequalities, because everyone has to be equal in order to be judged on their merit. Cool. So we also heard an argument about corporate accountability, and this is one that was really, really key to the debate. It was kind of the idea that corporations have an accountability to consumers, to their other employees, to actually hire talent. And although that is true, and we agree that corporations do have that accountability, as my second speaker spoke about, it leads to very substantial change. It leads to, again, sorry to name drop Lloyds, but the Lloyds Bank example of literally just like publishing something that's very minute, but enough for silence to be spoken on the issue. And that is not what side proposition is arguing. We are arguing, and we are proposing that we take into account that meritocracy is more influential than ethnic. Whoa, that's not right. That's completely wrong. That ethnic minority background in hiring and career progression is more influential than the idea of meritocracy. So I'm going to do some rebuilding and come to a conclusion and tell you why we've won. Okay, so as side proposition, we do believe that it is being from a minority background influencing hiring and career progression is more important than merit. So we understand that companies want talent, but they don't know that talent looks like me. They don't look in the areas in which they don't look for Black people. They don't look for us. So how can they want to hire talent when their initial understanding of talent doesn't include what we look like and who we are? So we also heard on the point of accountability in meritocracy. Meritocracy is a closed belief in the sense where if questioned and if posed and tried to hold actual corporations accountable, in reality, they can just say the person didn't have talent. We didn't view them as talented. They weren't suited for the role. They didn't meet that criteria. We think someone else has more potential. Meritocracy doesn't allow for discussion. It doesn't allow for the accountability that opposition proposes. To conclude, if you acknowledge that race has a part to play, and I'm adding this at opposition, if you acknowledge that race has a part to play with the social and historical weight that racism holds, how can you deny that in our current system that meritocracy is any sense more influential in career and hiring in the world? So I want to reiterate and close my speech with a phrase that was said by the CIO of St. James. Progress is not victory. We have come far, yes, but we are not where we need to be. And meritocracy doesn't allow for that discussion to happen. It is flawed in nature, harmful in practice, and it simply does not work. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the speaker for their speech. It's now time for you to vote. So you know what to do with the technology thingy majig. If you just enter your code and vote, does being from an ethnic minority background influence entry and progression more than merit? Go yes, you've got that option. Obviously no, and then you've got another option which essentially is sitting on the fence. So make a judgment call. You've got about 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Oh, it's looking like a close one. Not. I think I'm going to call it. I think the side arguing for yes, being from an ethnic minority background does influence entry and progression more. So huge congratulations to the opposition. But also a huge round of applause for the opposition for putting forward an argument. And just to reiterate, the speakers did not get to pick their sides. They were very gracious in accepting the sides that they were given. So that's it. I'm going to invite the speakers to leave the stage. Thank you so much as you exit. They will be around. Please grab them and talk to them and interrogate them. And I now want to call upon Angie Kang-Stewart, who's the MD at Man Group, who's going to give the closing remarks.
Hi, everyone. So thank you to the guys and the ladies for their debates. I think it was interesting on both sides, and it was really interesting seeing the results and the questions in the room. I did not prepare anything for this, so I'm bringing my authentic self onto the stage. I find these conversations, it's 20 years in asset management. I'm an Indian Sikh woman by background, married to a black Jamaican man for 26 years with 3 children. And this matters to me. I have a 23-year-old and a 20-year-old. The conversations they bring me, the questions they ask me, the lack of representation they see in our industry, the lack of representation they see at C-suite in our industry is something I just cannot answer. And therefore, when I look at meritocracy, and there was a comment on this earlier, utopia. It's a great myth, in my view. You know, it's a great aspiration, and I think we can say it is an aspiration, and we should aspire for meritocracy. There's something else that came out of the debates that really resonated with me, and that was accountability. Meritocracy should have accountability, and it should be based on clear metrics. Those metrics should be defined and well understood by everybody at the firm. We should hold our firms accountable, but it can only be measured with metrics. And if there is no definition around meritocracy, and there was a lack of that even today, knowing what we mean by meritocracy, we debated it. The two sides debated what is actual meritocracy. So if we just struggle to understand it, and we think it's hard work, we think it's talent, but maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's soft skills, hard skills. And every time you have a year-end review, and your impact in your work and your day job is excellence, it's black excellence, and therefore your promotion is based on your lack of soft skills, or your lack of networks, or your lack of ability to speak up, or manage, or soft skills that haven't been invested in, then how can meritocracy exist? So I think the first step has to be definition and accountability from what I heard on the debate. I think the win was obvious from your votes, and maybe that is subject to who is represented in the room as well. But I think these conversations are difficult to have. Having a safe space to go into your workplace and have this with your managers, with your leadership, and things that we should be bringing to the table all the time is something that we struggle with. I heard conversations about, and I definitely was raised this way, you know, work twice as hard, not twice as hard, 10 times as hard. Be in the office longer than anyone else to get half as much as somebody else. That's not right. That's not meritocracy. That is not what you need to do to achieve in your careers. I remember when Justin and I first started the mentoring circles a few years ago, and I think seniority, somebody said in the room, you know, when you get to progression and you become more senior, then it is about how good you are at your job. You become much more protected with the MD title, with the senior MD title. You become further away from what it's like with the microaggressions. And when we heard in those mentoring circles some of the things that our young black colleagues were experiencing in the workplace, we were shocked because we had become distanced from it. We had been protected by our titles. Now, is that right or is it wrong? Does it make us more alienated from those on the ground? And those mentoring circles have continued to challenge our stereotypes, our thinking, and our knowledge of what the experience actually feels like. So I want to say congratulations to all of the debaters this evening. It was enlightening, it was interesting. I think it just reiterates and continues to tell me how much work there still is to do. Bringing your authentic self to work is hard. My name is not Angie, it's Anjuman. How many times have I used Anjuman in the workplace? 0. How many times I put it on a CV? 0. Is it on LinkedIn? No. So I think it's very hard to know how to be yourself in the workplace, and until those conversations are had and accepted, then maybe this will still be a conversation for us. And we'll have another debate on it. Now, I do have some next steps, so I wanted to thank everybody involved in this. I also want to thank our sponsors, so Bruin, WTW, and State Street. I want to thank the Diversity Project and obviously Talk About Black, which I am a part of. I also want to thank all of the participants, the ladies who debated so eloquently. One feedback I've been given in my career is I talk too fast, but today I felt like I had to listen very fast. So well done, ladies, for getting so many words into a short period of time. I also want to thank you for being so candid with your feedback, for the number of, just the black excellence, the ethnic minority excellence in this room. Like, I'm really impressed by the people in the room, and also to speak up and tell your truth. And then finally, if you would like to be involved in a Talk About Taboo event and hosting this at your offices, then please do reach out. The email addresses are available online and here, so please do get involved. And then finally, I am going to be handing over to Michelle. Yeah, hi, Michelle. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing you at drinks.
Thanks, Angie. Just to talk to you about next steps. So the reception is about to start, so we'd like to invite you all to go into the reception area, which is just up there. Just also to let you know that we'll be taking some video in the reception, so to let you know that somebody from Talk About Black will be talking to you to ask if you'd like to take part in our social video as well. So once again, thank you to everyone who took part this evening, and hope you enjoyed the event.